There are a ton of premium items in Pokemon Go, and some of them have stood the test of time. They are incredibly useful, and they are definitely worth you spending your Pokecoins on, but there's also several items that a lot of players have long forgotten, or they just simply are not that useful. So today I'm going to be talking about all of the different various premium items that exist in Pokemon Go, and talk about whether or not they are still useful in 2025. Alright, how's it going everyone? Jinsula here with a brand new Pokemon Go video. I hope your day is going really well, and let's get right into it. So, today we're going to be talking about premium items, specifically because we are going to be seeing an increase to the level cap, which is going to make certain premium items a lot more useful. But in general, we've seen a lot of different use cases for these various items, and their usefulness has gone up and down over time. And some of them, they were really relevant at one point, mainly because Niantic would implement some positive changes to them, but of course, those changes were also taken away. So certain items have lost their relevance. So today I'm going to be talking about each premium item and whether or not they are still useful here in 2025, and which items I predict are going to be more useful in the future. Now, since I mentioned the increase to the level cap, let's talk about the first premium item, which is, of course, Lucky Eggs. Now, Lucky Eggs over time has definitely lost their relevance. It's one of those things that a lot of players used to really care about, specifically because when you level up, you get a whole bunch of rewards, and of course your Pokemon get a lot more powerful. But at this point, a lot of players have reached the max level, or they reached a level high enough where they could max out their Pokemon. So the desire to get as much experience as possible is not necessarily something that is on a lot of players' minds nowadays, but I do think this is subject to change. Of course, we're going to be seeing an increase to the level cap literally this week, and I think because of that, people are going to care about Lucky Eggs once again. The way that you use Lucky Eggs is actually quite important, considering that, yes, this is a premium item. You do not want to waste your Lucky Eggs, but I think some players out there, they already know how to use your Lucky Eggs, but basically, you will want to use them to get the most experience as possible, and the two situations where players typically use Lucky Eggs is with when they do a whole bunch of raid battles, like let's say for a raid day, or when they're about to hit best friends with a whole bunch of their friends. You're gonna get the most experience for your Lucky Egg within those two situations. So I do predict that once we see the new level cap and players need to collect as much experience as possible once again, you're going to start seeing a lot more uses with Lucky Eggs. So I will say that in 2025, Lucky Eggs are going to be important, but it's really because of the increase to the level cap. Now, the next item is, of course, the one that I believe has stood the test of time, and it's really because of what it does, and that is, of course, the Premium Battle Pass. Now, Premium Battle Passes, of course, is your way of doing raid battles aside from your free daily raid pass. And for a lot of different raid bosses, it's always going to be beneficial for you to do multiple of those raid bosses, because either it has a shiny form, and the shiny rate is going to be much lower, so you're not almost guaranteed to get that shiny. And then, of course, when it comes to IVs, some players really want to get 100% of various legendaries. So doing multiple raids is actually something that is very common. And of course, if you want to do more than one raid per day, you're going to need premium battle passes. So I really do think this is probably going to be the one item that is always going to be the most important. But of course, it's not so much just getting premium battle passes, it's all about getting them in the most efficient way possible. And that of course means you will need to pay attention to those gift boxes, because the amount of raid passes that you get for the amount of Pokecoins that you spend needs to be really high. Otherwise, you're going to get ripped off. So there is a bit of a game with that. I feel like a lot of players over the years have kind of developed this sense of just looking for the best deals. Maybe they have their own different criterias for when they purchase raid passes, but I really do think that it is a super important item that you should always be trying to get. Alright, the next premium item is something that personally I feel like is still relevant, but it's not necessarily going to be for a majority of players, and that is of course super incubators. Now, compared to regular incubators, super incubators are really nice because it reduces the hatch time of any egg that you use it on, but Of course, it's also going to be more expensive than regular incubators, but I really do think super incubators are still relevant, even though a lot of players out there just simply do not care about hatching eggs as much as they used to. I really do think that regardless of whatever Pokemon you get, this is one of the best ways you can get yourself rare Pokemon, and also a great way for you to pick up resources like Stardust and experience. So super incubators are always going to be relevant in my opinion, but I do think what Niantic needs to do is make better egg pools, and I think more players will actually care about hatching eggs. Now, of course, along the same lines, we have the regular incubator, and for much of the same reasons as super incubators, I think they're still relevant to this day. The one thing with regular incubators is that I think it's better if you use them on smaller kilometer eggs, like for example 2-kilometer eggs and 5-kilometer eggs, maybe even 7-kilometer eggs, and then you save your super incubators for the long distance eggs like 10-kilometer and 12-kilometer eggs. I think that's the best way to utilize both of these incubators, because when it comes to hatching eggs, of course, like I said, they're a great way to farm up Stardust as well as rare Pokemon. So if you're skipping out on using regular incubators on smaller eggs, your egg storage is constantly going to be filled up with junk eggs, and I think the best way to clear them out for the better eggs is of course using regular incubators on the daily so that you can hatch those regular 2-kilometer and 5-kilometer eggs. Alright, next up, let's move to an item which I think is actually not relevant for a majority of players, but for myself personally, I've been using these quite a lot, and that is of course Poffins. Now, Poffins are an interesting thing because it's something that's incredibly niche. It's primarily used for the Buddy Adventure system, but it definitely does a lot for the Buddy Adventure system. If you're trying to get your Pokemon to best buddies, you will probably need to use Poffins here and there because it accelerates the amount of hearts that you can get. The one thing that I like to do with Poffins is that if I'm planning to visit a new area, or if I'm planning to have a full day of Pokemon Go where I know I can maximize every single heart, then I will pop a Poffin on that Pokemon so that I could double up on all the hearts that I'm going to accumulate. Of course, you still need to do all the tasks. You need to spin a new Pokestop, you need to do 3 battles, play with it, and also take snapshots. But you'd only have to do those things once. That is the nice thing with a Poffin, because essentially you're just going to be doubling up on all the hearts that you get, and it makes the process of getting best buddies so much easier. But again, this is very niche. Not a lot of players out there actually care about getting best buddy Pokemon, so I will say that Poffins are not necessarily that relevant compared to other items. Alright, next up, let's talk about Incense. So, Incense is a very interesting case because over the years, we've seen the relevance of this item go up and down, and it's mainly because of various changes that Niantic has done with Incense over the years. First and foremost, it was one of those items that got a huge boost during the pandemic. They actually increased the duration of Incense and also increased the spawn rate, and for a lot of players, using Incense was essential. Like, if you want to maximize the amount of Pokemon you can get, if you want to get rare Pokemon, you will want to pop Incense as often as you can. But of course, since then, Niantic has actually taken out a lot of those changes, and Incense are kind of reverted back to how they used to be. And I think because of that, a lot of players tend to forget about Incense, especially when it comes to major events. And I think that's specifically where you will want to use Incense, and probably where a lot of players use Incense when it comes to community days, or when it comes to Pokemon Go Fest and Go Tour, those things. Like, that's primarily when you would use Incense, but personally, I think it's still pretty good to use. If you have a whole bunch of Incense saved up, you should be using them, especially during those special events, but maybe during an in-game event, that is actually really good. But along those lines, there is a premium item that you really cannot purchase, but it's going to be something that will be available to you once a day, and that is of course the Daily Adventure Incense. And in terms of premium items, maybe this one doesn't necessarily count, but I will say it's incredibly useful, and it's something that you should just kind of have as a routine every single day to use. Just set aside 15 minutes every single day, pop the Daily Adventure Incense, go for a walk, and see what Pokemon you get. Sometimes you might encounter a Galarian legendary bird, which is incredibly exciting, but I really do think the Daily Adventure Incense is one of the best things that they've ever implemented in Pokemon Go, and I highly suggest you always remember using it. Alright, and finally, there is one more premium item that I want to talk about, and this one, in my opinion, is probably the most relevant premium item that we've ever had, and that is, of course, star pieces. Now, the reason why I say star pieces are so important is because of Stardust being the most important resource you can have. Stardust is essentially the one thing you need in order to power up your Pokemon, but also to unlock different moves on the Pokemon, and generally what makes your Pokemon stronger. It is absolutely essential that you get as much Stardust as you can. I think one of the best ways you could utilize a star piece is if you're about to hatch a whole bunch of eggs. That is definitely going to allow you to get yourself a whole bunch of Stardust. And then of course, there is the seasonal PvP rewards. That is probably the one way you could get a huge chunk of Stardust out of your 1 star piece, and just in general, you will want to make sure you're using them. And I really do think this is a super important item, and it's going to continue to be a super important item pretty much throughout the entirety of the future. Alright, and that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. There are, of course, other premium items that have been introduced and are going to be introduced, like, of course, there's the Lucky Trinket, there is golden bottle caps, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Yes, those are all super important. Same with the max particle thing. Like, all that stuff is really good, but we really need to give them a lot of time to breathe. They're pretty much new items that have been introduced very recently, and we really do not know how relevant they're going to be in the foreseeable future. But I still think those items are pretty good and pretty important, but I just wanted to give a bit of a highlight to some of the items that we've had for several years and determine whether or not they are still relevant, and I think I did that. So yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Definitely share your thoughts regarding everything that I talked about down below. Do you have any opinions regarding some of the items that I talked about? Do you feel like certain items are actually more relevant or less relevant compared to what I said? I would definitely like to know your reasons for thinking that, so make sure you share it in the comments below and let's have a great discussion. And thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if it's your first time here, and don't forget that notification bell so you know exactly when I upload videos. And real quick, let me give a shout out to all of my patrons on Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you want to support the Jinsula channel, the best way you can do that is going to be by joining my Patreon. And if you decide to become a paid Patreon member, I'm going to add you to my Pokemon Go friends list. So that means for stuff like remote raids, the friendship system, opening and sending gifts, different things like that. If you want to play Pokemon Go with me, then make sure you go and check out my Patreon. I'll put a link to it in the description below. And if you want to support my channel in a completely different way, you could do so by following me on social media. My handle is @Jinsula. I'm on the platforms you see right now on the bottom of your screen. Make sure you go over there and give me a follow, and that'll be a huge help to my channel, and you'll be able to keep up with my daily life, and you'll have access to some exclusive content as well. And with all that said, that's going to be it for this video. I'm Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself today, and I'll catch you in the next one.